Most people think they're leveling up, but almost nobody knows their real level. Today, I'm showing you exactly where you are and how far you could actually go. Leveling up isn't about becoming invincible. It's about becoming smarter at survival, at your everyday tasks, using your resources in ways they weren't always designed to be used. Whether it be in a game or in real life, these levels don't necessarily change your physical body. They change your instincts, your natural reflex, your judgment. A person that is level 100 doesn't survive the impact that killed a level 10 just because they're made of steel. It's because they learned how to survive that blow. But what does all of that mean? Well, let's see what it means to become a higher level in both games and in real life. Games are naturally why this conversation is even happening, right? I mean, when I say you're a certain level, I'm sure the first thing we're both thinking about is a game. Simply put, at level 1, you are a wee baby. You get hit, you're probably not going to be okay. Very similar to what happens when you hit a baby. Preface, don't hit a baby. If you were, say, level 100, you'd be a big, super buff Giga Chad. Getting punched doesn't even matter. About to get hit by a train, you start bench pressing that train. Obviously, I'm being hyperbolic, but that's the nature of leveling. It's an incremental increase of power over time given via experience. And when I say experience, I mean this twofold. Experience, in a realistic sense, matches the nature in which you get stronger. Over time, you learn and manifest that knowledge into raw Giga Chad power. In a video game, experience is the actual metric used to gauge your level. For instance, starting at little baby level 1 again, we may need 100 experience, or XP, to level up. After 100 XP, we reach level 2, and we need a total of 300 XP to level up again. This means we need 200 more. 200 more XP later, we finally have reached level 3, so on and so on. So then comes the big question. What does this look like in real life? Well, in order to figure that out, we'll need a comparison, and I have a perfect example for you. But first, what forms of levels are there? When it comes to leveling, there are a few leveling methods I'll need to clarify: horizontal, vertical, and cyclical progression. So what do those mean, and why do we care? Well, in order to answer that, we'll need to dive into a little bit of a deeper question. Why do levels exist in the first place? When it comes to a game, levels act as a method of measuring your progress, one way or another. Sometimes this is intrinsically tied to the gameplay. Maybe you need to be level 25 before you can progress to the next section of the world. More often though, it's instead a measure of how powerful you are in comparison to your environment. In this case, you can progress at whatever level you wish, but if you're not level 25 or higher, the game might be quite a bit more difficult. This also gives a reward for interaction. Instead of beelining the final boss, you are rewarded with XP every time you take a detour. Perhaps you go mining, or find a new city, or slay a few enemies distinct from the plot. Now, instead of being level 25 when you get to the next area, you're already level 35. All because of your hard work. It's a great way to customize your experience in a game. But what type of boons do you receive when you level up? Well, it depends on the type of progression. In a vertical progression, which I would imagine is what we all thought of when this conversation even started, is pretty cut and dry. When you level up, your numbers get bigger. You go from 2 speed to 3, or you do 50% more damage each level, or you gain more hit points, which allow you to survive for longer. Vertical progression is you getting physically stronger in some way. At first glance, this feels like it requires the most suspension of disbelief. You don't finish a task for your old grandpappy and then suddenly get 50% faster, right? Well, in some ways you do, but you'll have to watch to the end in order to see why. In contrast to vertical progression, there is horizontal progression. A common example of horizontal progression is Pokemon. This isn't a measure of how big your stats get, but rather the amount of options you have. Rather than getting physically stronger or faster, you may instead have access to more weapons, armors, and areas. In Pokemon, you as a trainer do not gain any power over your time of playing the game. Instead, you gain access to more and more of the world, and thus more and more Pokemon to add to your team. Even though you never got any physically stronger, a player that's only seen Route 2 will be much weaker than somebody who's explored the entire Kanto region. Hey there, you, the one commenting right now. Shh. I know. The Pokemon themselves do vertically progress. You are correct. Thank you for pointing that out in a very polite and non-hostile way. Horizontal progression is the most realistic form of leveling, in my opinion. It's also pretty cut and dry, and parallels real life pretty well. As you grow up, you see new places, learn new things, and thus have access to more information. This is a natural growth in power. It's perhaps a more subtle version, but for sure, it's power nonetheless. And finally, we have cyclical progression. This one is the most interesting in my opinion. Cyclical progression is what you probably imagine when I say roguelike. If you've never played a roguelike, generally it goes like this. When you start the game, you'll enter an area, perhaps a dungeon. Within this dungeon, there are two types of upgrades you may receive: permanent upgrades and temporary upgrades. These temporary options are likely going to be quite powerful, perhaps doubling your speed or your damage output. However, when you finish a dungeon, you may gain access to permanent upgrades. These are likely expensive for lower value, but they'll follow you for the rest of the game. Rinse and repeat as you go through the dungeon after dungeon until you finally perish. And once you do, your progress is lost, so you will need to start again. Not all roguelites match this style of progression, but this is a strong example of such cyclical progression. In this example, your power level will rapidly increase and decrease as you gain and shed temporary upgrades, while you slowly expand vertically over time. And with all three of those systems under our belt, how do these correspond to you and I? How does this make the difference between surviving or dying to a single shot? Let's start with the comparison. When it comes to figuring out what level you may be, we need some type of basis for progression. Truthfully, we could put any number on any person. It's an abstract number. However, when we do put an abstract number on a person, we'll gain the ability to compare it to something or somebody else, or even better, ourselves. Unsurprisingly, when we're young, we're not all that good at most things. As a baby, we are, not all that capable. Luckily, we grow after a while, so that's pretty cool. Since it's the weakest it will be, we'll call our infant selves level 1. Normally in most games, level 1 would at least be some amount of capable, but we have a lot of ground to cover here. Now, at base level, I'm going to assume that between being a bouncing little baby and lesser adulthood, we're going to increase to a total of 10 times power. This is an extremely subjective stance, but here's my argument. This is a complete baseline. This isn't including any trades, any specific skills, training, nothing of that nature. This is just the effect of pure vertical power via maturity. We are physically stronger, we are smarter, we are faster, we're pretty much everything. Not only that, but we're more financially powerful, and that's a big topic for later, so keep that in mind. This also means that education, work, and practice will each make us level up, at least marginally, in some capacity. So perhaps if we were to pursue a skill for most of our adolescence, we could end up level 11 or 12 by the time we're an adult. And that's pretty cool. But you know what's even cooler than that? You're really cool. And I think we should hang out sometime, but we can't do that if you don't subscribe. So you gotta do that real quick. Oh, hold on, it's loading. I mean, if you're not into that, we could do a bit on Twitch or in Discord. I'm super active on Discord and I keep Twitch as interactive as possible. If you're looking to really get a hold of me, those two spots are the best by a million miles. Also, sometimes we play funny games that chat gets to participate in. Sometimes I give them access to my keyboard. Sometimes if you type in chat, it'll read it out loud. Oh, the subscribe button is ready now. Go ahead and press that. We can get into the next topic. Finally putting all of the pieces together. Now that we have an idea of what type of progression we can use, it's about time we talk about what power actually means. First of all, what is the closest to life? Vertical progression, horizontal progression, or cyclical progression? To be completely blunt, realistically, horizontal is the answer. Life is a lot closer to horizontal progression by nature. Over time, we learn more, our agency expands, our world grows larger. However, we talked about vertical progression in the form of infancy to adulthood already, so we know it's possible. What about cyclical progression? Is that part of real life? Well, let's talk about forms of power. We've gone over, briefly, the idea of strength, speed, and knowledge. But that's far from what changes the scope of our everyday life, right? What about charisma, your contacts in the world, your understanding of the system you reside within, how much money you have? I think that money is, unfortunately, a huge portion of this conversation. Take yourself, no matter who you are and where you stand, and consider the difference between having virtually no money and having oodles and boodles of money. The difference is vast, right? Even if with money you acted like you didn't, or vice versa, there's certain protections you need to put in place in order to even compensate. If you were to have $1 million in liquid in your pocket right now and continue life at a minimum wage job in a sedan that you got handed down, you still have security. This is like IRL smurfing, essentially. Money brings a sense of peace, or even paranoia in some cases, due to its ability to convert directly into power. The term usually goes money is power, but realistically it converts into power. Money is agency. It's the ability to influence the world around you in a very meaningful way, and this is a form of power we can't ignore. In fact, I would consider this a form of cyclical progression. Hear me out here. Your physical traits, whether that be your strength, how good you are with your hands, how high you can jump, these are genuinely affected by your vertical progress. These are difficult to move around. They take time and effort, and a single level of pure vertical progression may take months at best, years at worst. However, this is a means for you to specialize in your trade. We are limited by the system that we reside in, even if the system is simply the laws of physics. Our body can only withstand so much, physically, mentally, and emotionally. In order to grow, we need to offer up huge bodily demands. The pain of this progression is synonymous with our growth, and that's really hard. It's never easy, because if it was easy, we're removing the entire point of trying to grow in the first place. When we're young, we have a horizontal progression of basically zero. Our world is tiny, and our scope is barely even a point in space. However, as we grow up and mature, the more we explore and wonder, our horizontal progression will expand and increase. The difference between somebody who has stagnated versus someone who has touched every corner of the world is going to be significant. And of course, the form of power and agency that will come and go most frequently is the financial kind. You know, somewhat cyclically, if you would. As we take our journey through life, we will take jobs, make money, and then spend that money to live. We will trade money to make money. We'll request money and pay back more money than we asked for. This is the most cyclical form of power I've ever seen. When somebody builds a skyscraper, an average of $30 to $100 million is going to get paid out. I assure you, it's not very often that someone is just going to pop open their wallet and whip out $1 million bills and say, hey, can I have one of those, please? No, you need to go to an enterprise and request that they foot the bill on a contract, a promise that you will have enough power to pay back its worth. And the people giving the money, banks, are giving you money that flows through them. When you put money into the bank will spend that money. It's a huge part of how banks function. And with all of that in mind, what level are we? Or more importantly, how do we level up? Well, I will say first and foremost, which progression are you the best at? And out of the three, which is the one you have the most levels in? If we're level 10 at adulthood, what level are we through maturity alone? Starting from there, we'll tack on a level for each trade you're consistently experienced in. Perhaps 2 levels from each trade you've gained professional interest in. A level, perhaps, for each country you've spent a serious amount of time in. Maybe states, provinces, or cities if there's a drastic change in culture. Perhaps a free level, just for being a smaller part of multiple cultures, and so on. And of course, there's a number of levels you'd receive based on income, right? With that in mind, if using this completely arbitrary system to decide how you level up and progress in life, I personally recommend considering it this way. Consider the influence and agency you have received from your best progression. What engine does it create? When I say what engine does it create, what I mean is how can you leverage that power to amass another progression? Can you exchange your horizontal experience of the world into a vertical lift by using methods that don't exist in your area? Perhaps there's training techniques specific to a continent you've only ever visited. Perhaps you can exchange your financial cyclical progression for explorative horizontal progression by I don't know, like buying a plane ticket and going somewhere or something. I don't really remember what the sun looks like, so I assume that's still how you do it. The truth is that we're all going to be good at different things, and we're all going to move at our own pace. Power breeds power, and generally at an exponential rate. Don't be disheartened by where you are. Be excited at where you could go. Leverage your strengths to build upon your weaknesses. We are only as strong as our weakest link, so grab your handy-dandy Flex Seal and start fixing up those cracks in your own armor. I do believe that a simulated environment, such as a video game or a tabletop RPG, can be really strong experiences for us in life, but only if used correctly. What can we learn about a real-world system, such as society, by playing in a fictional system? It's a simulation, and simulations are designed to be useful, or so is how I take it. The point is, do what you dream to do, and don't let anything stop you. I believe in you. And of course, thanks.